nowadays everybody's in their own room. And, how many clients have I had who've said, oh, my parents came in and they found all the bottles underneath the bed or something. We've all gone into our own little rooms. We've all got our computers. We've all got our own little thing. But everybody's scattered. They're not together as a family.
Yeah.
So I think that drinking alone, we need to be careful that people don't just think, well, I don't live on my own, so this doesn't apply to me.
I dreamt that you were twisting through seven.
And welcome back to the Soberful podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I'm Chip.
If you like the podcast, please, could you give it a rating? It would be so helpful if you could just do a quick rating or a quick review and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We have lots of wonderful episodes. Chip and I have endless subjects to talk about. And
we do.
We also have lots of interesting guests.
Yeah.
We are going to talk about drinking alone and unpack that a little bit because it's changed, hasn't it, over the years?
It's changed a lot. When I first started training, I think, I may well be corrected here, but certainly in the AA literature, that was one of the questions they would ask, do you drink alone? And I'm pretty sure that it was part of the DSM, what would have been 4 then, criteria for looking at problem drinking was, do you drink alone? And I know that there has been an absolute explosion of solitary drinking, some of it driven by COVID, some of it driven by perhaps the loss of places where people can now congregate. Certainly in the UK, I think something like 200 pubs a week are closing down or something. So places where people would normally have gone and drank, wine bars. I mean, I'm young enough to, young enough? I'm nothing like young enough. I'm old enough to remember when the concept of a wine bar was introduced, and like, oh my God, a wine bar, a place where you go and drink wine. It was like an upmarket pub. And so there were places where you could go and drink. And there's something about that's going on now, I think, where there are a lot of people for various reasons drinking alone. And I think that is something that people need to be very wary about and super careful.
So I want to unpack this, but I kind of want to frame it in a larger context in that certainly, since when I was first drinking as a teenager, there has been a slow creep of the normalization of abnormal drinking. And I think back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, alcohol consumption was in a pub or a nightclub or a social venue. It was at home. I mean, certainly people were drinking it on their own at home in those decades, but there was kind of that's where you drank. Now, since I, came of age and drank and got sober, that has creeped out of there massively. And alcohol, we've talked about yoga and wine. So one of my clients sent me this last week and I put it on my Instagram. There is a vet practice in Chicago that has put a bar in the waiting room for their anxious and nervous clients who are bringing their beloved animal. There is a bar and they will offer them a glass of wine or champagne in the waiting area before they go in with their animal.
I saw that. I thought it was a spoof.
No, it's true.
Oh my God.
Now, here's the other thing that they've done. They wanted to create a spa-like atmosphere. And it's like, okay, spa equals wellness.
Health,
alcohol does
wellness,
not equal alcohol does not equal. And my client who is a vet said, they were saying, we want to calm down our anxious owners. She says, I calm down anxious owners with communication and education about what we're dealing with. And I do not want them, like, they have to make decisions. And I don't want them, I mean, is it even legal to make a decision about surgery or money?
No, I know that there are a lot of decisions that you cannot make if you're inebriated. I mean, it's certainly in custody and things like that. You can't make decisions if you're inebriated.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's this normalization of abnormal drinking. It's inserting alcohol in places it doesn't belong.
Yep.
So getting back to drinking alone, I think that that has been normalized now, whereas it used to be if you're drinking on your own, there's no reason to drink on your own. You're not being social. The reason you're drinking on your own is you're drinking to deal with feelings, to numb yourself or escape a reality, right? That's the
Yeah,
assumption.
completely. I mean, I'm old enough to add a certain historical perspective. I think that's my role in life here in this podcast, is to add historical context sometimes.
Back in
uh,
the olden days when it was all in
yeah,
black and white.
but in the olden days, there were very, very few people drunk in the street. Very few. You know, you it was
Yeah.
considered, it wasn't a great thing to be seen to be. It would be, your family would be ashamed,
Mm,
except in places like, oh no, I was about to name a town, then I think no, that was just open me up for criticism. But on the whole, it was very, very rare to see somebody drunk and disorderly. Then, there was a big explosion in the kind of Ladette movement, where
mm,
for no, and for good reason, there was no reason why it shouldn't have happened. But a lot of women started drinking, and you would see women drunk on the street, which historically was something that you'd never seen before, and
mm.
it became a sort of badge of honor, to be completely out of your face, sitting by the side of the road, puking your guts out.
Yeah,
It wasn't,
100%. That was me.
yeah, it wasn't considered a deeply shameful thing. History, society had moved on, culture had moved on, but it nevertheless meant that we now had, open drunkenness was much more common than it ever had been. And I think, so things do change, but I don't think you had very many people who drank at home on their own. It wasn't considered, it just wasn't sort of something that happened. And I don't know whether it's the kind of continuation of that kind of much more openness about being drunk, much more socially, it was much more socially accepted. I'm not saying it was socially accepted, but the shame factor associated with being drunk in public diminished completely. So there's an element of that. And then there's an element, of course, of COVID, which had a big impact on shutting down places where you could go and have a drink. So alcohol moved into the home much more. And it became much more, well, we'll go out and buy the alcohol, we'll bring it home. And actually, you were probably part of that prinking movement. I know you've talked about it before, where you would go and get a bottle and you would drink with your friends before you went
Mm-hmm.
out to drink.
100%. Yeah.
So there was that kind of thing. So little developments. I think it's dangerous for many reasons. I think it's dangerous because if you're drunk and you trip and you fall over, there's nobody there to pick you up
Mm.
and help you. You could bang your head and bleed out. I don't know. But I think that's a factor. I think it's not a sensible thing to do. Where do all the accidents? I mean, so many people die every year of accidents because they fall downstairs and they do things like that. Well, if you're on your own, there's nobody there to help you. But there's also nobody there to judge you. There's nobody there to monitor you. And I think that is a very dangerous absence, because it means that I can delude myself that what I'm doing is okay. This is what everybody does. They all sit at home and they get themselves drunk in front of the television every night. And I see it as a very detrimental development in the whole kind of way in which we drink. We're closing ourselves into our little cells and drinking too much without anybody making any comment. We don't upset anybody, which we don't have people going, God, I wish you'd stop drinking so much.
Yeah, and I want to say actually drinking alone is probably one of the defining characteristics of most of my clients, because most of my clients, and all my clients have aged with me. Most of my clients tend to be middle-aged women, and they tend to be quite successful women. A lot of them are, senior executives or have their own businesses or
Yeah,
whatever. And they are coming home and they are drinking at 5 o'clock. And before they know it, they've drunk a bottle of wine most nights.
yeah,
And sometimes they have a spouse there or a friend, but often they are drinking on their own. And it's a way to what's happened is, and I'm thinking one client in particular, is it's a pressure relief. They are
yeah,
so up to here when they come home. They are so, the stress, that just, they feel so crushed that that first glass of wine is that, like, oh, then they can breathe, then they can
yeah.
deal with anything. And you can see how quickly that will become habitual
Yeah.
when you're doing that, because this is something I always stress to my clients. It's not, most of us grew up in families where a lot of stuff wasn't role modeled that we needed, how to
Mhm.
deal with feelings, how to process stuff, right? So we discovered alcohol and drugs. But then what happens when we're adults and young adults, because we've outsourced our emotional management to alcohol, we
Yeah.
miss opportunities to learn how to deal with stress. Life is full of lessons and a lot of them are
Oh,
uncomfortable,
I really like
right?
that phrase, outside our emotional development. I outsourced.
Outsource
I
our
really like that.
emotional
Yeah.
management to
Yeah.
alcohol. I
Yeah.
we and that's what. Are you writing it down?
I am. My memory is such that I
I'll
won't.
text it to you. I'll
Yeah,
text it to
text it to
you.
me. Yeah.
I use it a lot. Um, and that's what it is. We're just outsourcing. We're like,
Yeah.
I can't deal with everything that's inside of me. I can't deal with what happened at work today. Can't deal with my spouse. I just can't deal with my kids. I just can't deal. So we outsource to alcohol,
Yeah.
and it works in that moment. It works, and off we go.
Yeah, I mean, and as you were talking just then, I was thinking how things have changed so much. Where got on chat shows, on panel, whatever, the number of times people go, "Well, yeah, I had a bit too many the other night," or "Yeah, well, I go
Yeah,
home," and nobody. But it's like so normalized now to talk about
yeah.
drinking too much. Oh, you're looking a bit worse for wear this morning. Well, yeah, it was, Valentine's Day last night or something, and it's become so normalized to talk about excessive drinking. Yeah, so which is a whole different topic, but there are some fundamental changes going on. I think I'm seeing, as rather like you, strangely enough, I see a lot of men who are living on their own now, who are,
Mm,
and actually, I think that drinking alone, we need to kind of make it. It's not strictly, am I living on my own drinking, or am I? Because also that's another thing that's happened with with the advent of the internet and things like that, is that households become much more separate entities, whereas in the
mm,
past households might congregate together around the television. That would be the way that people viewed their information. They'd probably all sit round together watching television. Nowadays, everybody's in their own room.
mm,
And, how many clients have I had who've said, oh, my parents came in and they found all the bottles underneath the bed or something, because that
mm,
person is, we've all gone into our own little rooms. We've all got our computers. We've all got our own little thing. And a household with one internet source, but everybody's scattered. They're not together
yeah,
as a family.
yeah.
So I think that drinking alone, we need to be careful that people don't just think, well, I don't live on my own, so this doesn't apply to me. I think there are lots of people who, one person's upstairs getting drunk, one person's downstairs getting stoned out of their head, or
Mm,
there's still that sense of you're doing it alone. You're doing it not as a convivial social thing. Not that I think it
mhm,
is, but I mean, that's the basis of it all. I
yeah,
suppose that we're supposed to be having a convivial time. Why are you drinking alone? As you said, why am I drinking alone? The whole
mm.
the whole raison d'être, I thought, was either to enhance the kind of culinary
Meal
experience, yeah,
or to
yeah,
be social.
or to be social, yeah. So
Yeah,
why am I drinking on my own, basically on my own, in
yeah,
front of the television without? And I think that sense of, as I've said earlier on, the lack of observation, the lack of criticism from anybody else, just lends itself obviously to increased drinking, lack of insight into your drinking, lack of insight into how it affects your social life or your friendships or your relationships, because you're becoming more and more just in your own little world.
yeah. I want to say, I think drinking alone has been. Um, I think it can be a very female thing as well, and I think because back in the day, drinking spaces were very male dominated,
Yep.
and then. Well, certainly in the UK, we've talked about the expansion of the nighttime economy and the ladette culture, which kind of followed in America, I think, different, but it was much more normalized for women to go out and drink in bars with their friends. In America, the equivalent of that, I think, would be the whole Sex in the City. Like
Okay.
when that
Yeah.
was out in the 90s, was all about Carrie and her friends drinking.
I think that wine bars did that to a certain extent. Wine bars were
Yeah.
much more of a female thing, where
Mm.
they kind of provided a space for females to drink and congregate together in a safer space than a bar.
Yeah. Yeah, but also it does come down to safety. It is safer for women
Yeah.
to drink at home than it
Yep.
is to drink out. It's also cheaper, um, and I think that there's still, as we've talked about, a discrepancy in, I think it's still more shameful to be a female drunk than a male drunk.
Oh,
So I think there's
completely.
all
Oh,
those,
yeah. I mean,
and
I
then
think,
often they're mothers and they have to be there, at home with the
yeah,
kids. So I think that there's a lot of reasons that women have drunk alone at home, a
yes.
lot, and then it just becomes normalized.
I mean, as we said, even for all the ladette and the change in the sort of perspective of women drinking, it is still without doubt much more shameful to have to admit that you've got a drink problem if you're a woman than
Yeah,
you are if you're a man. I
yeah.
do just need to say that I feel, for the sake of balance, that yes, of course, it is safer in a way, for women to drink alone rather than be drunk in a public place like in a bar. But the same does apply for gay men who could also
Mhm.
be just as
Mhm.
susceptible to being taken advantage of.
Mhm.
Um, but I take it. I'm not denying your point at all. I do think that there is a sort of predatory sense of let's go out on the lash and see who we can pick up, kind of thing. Which
Mm.
obviously, and I don't know what it's like in America, but there's definitely has been, not a huge, but an increase in drinks being spiked,
Yeah.
which I guess
Yes.
all these things, in a way, we're kind of arguing against ourselves, because I think drinking alone is a very unsafe thing to do. But I can see how there are certain attractions to drinking alone. But I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to go somewhere safe in order to drink, why do you have to do it alone?
Mm.
Ask some girlfriends round, ask some guys round or something. But
That's it. I mean, I'm not arguing against myself. I think that's the reasons that women have done it, because they want to drink alcohol and they want the numbness.
yeah,
They want to run away from themselves. They want the anesthetic of it, and this is a way that works for them to achieve that,
yes,
is to drink alone. And so I want to go back to my point in that a lot of my clients are older women. I have a
hmm,
lot of clients 50, 60, 70s.
yeah,
And this is where it does get dangerous, because
yeah,
one of the most common ways that people really, really harm themselves is actually they have a fall. And
yeah,
having a fall, I don't know about you, Chip, but I keep having these moments where I'm like, but that's things that happen to old people. And I'm like, I'm an older person. Like I'm really having that, like, there's a t-shirt that says something like this, like, I can't remember it, but it's like, when you realize you're an older person, but you view other people as older, but I still think I'm about 28. And
yeah.
it's not. And I was reading somewhere actually that, God, I think it was, I can't remember the percentage, but it was, if you have a hip replacement or like a fall when you're like over 65, your
You,
chance of dying within 2 years is like, it was quite a high percentage. I want to say it was like 40% or something quite shocking. I was like, blimey. Like, because
I,
I don't think 65 is that old.
I know that's a bit spooky, because I've been accessing that information too. I don't know where it was, but because I was said my hip's probably going to need changing at some point, and I've had both my knees full knee replacement done some time ago now. But yeah, I read that information. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to stick with my hips. Actually, I
Yeah.
don't care. I'm not, because the statistics was quite scary about how
They were
much it
really, yeah.
yeah, about how much that impacted on your longevity of life. And I am somebody, as anybody who listens to this podcast regularly knows, I'm obsessed with waking up every morning and being delighted to do so, because I've got another day on this lovely earth.
Well, that's a
Well,
freaking good attitude to have. That's a
oh
good
God,
attitude to
I
have.
do. I mean, every morning I wake, I think, oh, fantastic! I've got another day. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I am, as I think I've said here before, I am not going to go gently into that dark night. I'm going to be kicking and bloody screaming. Uh, I just, I mean, and that's interesting, because I never thought when I was drinking that I would ever. I just didn't care, didn't care.
No.
I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't care. And now to be so vehemently thrilled to have another day, what have I done today? I haven't done a huge amount, but I've woken up with my wife. I've had a lovely, relaxing day. I've done a couple of little errands for the neighbour. I've done this. I will go to bed. I've had a great day, and
Yeah.
and
Small
I'm.
small
I hope.
pleasures, right?
Yeah, and I hope I have one tomorrow as well. It does beg the question, and I'm glad is that if you're living on your own, why do you feel the need to get drunk? What
Mm.
is, and that obvious, you have to ask yourself a question if you're doing that. What's going on with my life that it is
Yeah.
so miserable
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I have to get intoxicated? Now,
Yeah.
uh, I think
That I
that
have to numb
question,
my feelings,
yeah,
that I have to
yeah,
that I have no other way of dealing with the pressure or the stress or the crap that you have to endure every day. It is what we're saying is it's the biggest red flag that there is your drinking is problematic. Alcohol's not your friend, and it's only going to get worse from here.
and something else has just come to my mind, as often happens during these podcasts. I'm thinking about something, then I remember something. How many clients have I know? Actually, a lot of mine are men who their family have become really concerned about them. They're in their 40s, maybe going on
Yeah.
50s. They've been living on their own. Their marriage has failed. What happens when the relatives do eventually get access to the flat? They find it absolutely dirty,
Yeah,
bottles
men are not.
everywhere,
Yeah.
bottles everywhere, because nobody's come round and observed them. And that's one of the dangers, whatever gender you
Yeah.
are, of lone drinking, is that nobody observes you. I mean, if you go out in the middle of the street and you're drunk, people go, "Whoa, are you all right, mate? What's going on?"
Mm.
Or if you're going to a family party and you're drunk, people will say, what's going on with you? But
Mm.
if we don't have those observational criticisms,
Mm.
then obviously it'll we're very good at deluding ourselves about the impact we have on other people anyway. So if we haven't got that observational observance from other people, observational observance, there's a lot of nonsense that one. Observational criticism from other people. I mean, what pushes most people to get into sobriety? It's usually somebody else has said something. I think more often that we don't often sit at home on our own. Maybe we do. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a bit of a generalization there, but I think quite a lot of times something that tips somebody into asking for help or getting is because somebody said, "I think you drink too much," or "I think you got a bit of a problem." It usually we're worried about him or her. What can we do? I mean, actually, I was just thinking as I was saying that of a woman I know who's was drinking a lot on her own, but what made her register that was the influence of a friend who rang me and said, "I think she's drinking too much. What should I do?" And that's what triggered off the whole thing.
I remember like this always there was this one weekend in my life that always it was a bank holiday weekend that just is engraved on my brain. And I had a 3 day weekend and I had no plans, no one to see. And I would always get a bottle of wine on my way home Friday and drink it on my own. Sometimes my roommate would be there, but more often he wouldn't. And then I remember waking up Saturday morning and thinking, what am I going to do? And I
Yeah,
went and
yeah,
got alcohol. I went and got 2 bottles of wine at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I did this like, oh, dinner party tonight,
yeah, yeah,
and I started drinking them, and I drank them all by the afternoon, and I
yeah,
couldn't get drunk. Have you ever
yeah,
done that
yeah.
where I wanted to get to the sweet spot, and I couldn't get to the sweet spot, no
Such a
matter how much I
frustrating thing.
drank.
Oh my god, it's so frustrating that when that you just
I was
I
drinking, I was
can't
not
get
getting any
stoned enough.
relief.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not escaping myself. I'm
yeah,
still me. Like,
yeah,
where's this delicious numbness?
yeah.
And then
And from
I went to get a third, and yeah, oh my god, the loneliness of drinking on your
yeah,
own, the loneliness.
yeah. Because for me, I got to a point where I wasn't drunk enough until I was incapable of drinking more. I wanted
Yeah.
oblivion. And I
Yes.
think that's the question. Another question to ask is, how is my observed drinking different from my unobserved drinking? So I think,
Yeah.
we got the shopping in, you've gone and got your 2 bottles of wine. Well,
Yeah.
unobserved, before you've even put the other shopping away, you've poured yourself a glass and that's gone straight away. And then you've probably poured another one as you're putting the stuff away. So before you even sit down, you've probably done 2 glasses of wine. If you were observed and there was somebody else in the house and you did that, they'd go, "Bloody hell, you're going for it a bit strong, aren't you?" And that's the difference, I think, about uh, how. And I think it's a good question for people to ask: is my unobserved drinking different to
Yeah.
my observed drinking? And if there is a significant difference, Jesus, we drink spirits out of the bottle on our own.
Yeah.
You don't go to a party and drink gin out of a bottle. But I used to do that, not gin, vodka. But I mean,
I used to have
Yeah,
vodka in my handbag and I would knock it back in the toilets at college
yeah. I mean,
on my own. Those little
why
bottles.
extend the transaction by having to get a glass when you can just put it straight in your mouth? I mean,
Like,
it just seems
this is
ridiculous.
this is it's like, let's get down to it. This is about the effect.
Yeah,
I want the effect as quickly as possible.
yep,
It's not, yeah. Let's not dress this up that I'm enjoying like our episode we did the other week on high end drinking. This is not about the beautiful, expensive bottle of wine from Napa. This is about the effect. I remember also one night in this kind of period of time that I'm talking about, that Friday night drinking on my own. Like, it's like I remember I would have this feeling of dread, like typically, like, Thursday and Friday are good days of the week because it's like, yay, weekend
yeah,
around the
yeah,
corner, right? And weekend, so the weekends were not like that for me for a long time. I dreaded the weekends because I was so lonely. Like, by Thursday and Friday, I'd be like, all my colleagues and friends would be like, yay, Friday, and I'd be dreading it because it was like hours of time on my own. So I would always, like, Friday night, it's completely justified. I'd pick up a Chinese takeaway and a bottle of wine because that's normal and acceptable, celebrating the end of the week. And I remember one Friday night getting drunk on my own and then really wanting to dance and then putting on music loudly and dancing and like being like, way. And then I had this like moment where, like, I was dancing away to ABBA probably, where it just sort of hit me, the absolute tragedy of that. And I was like 25, being a
hmm,
25 young woman in London,
yep,
in the most magical city in the world, drunk in her crappy apartment, dancing on her own because she had no one else to dance with. And I had this
sure,
moment where this, like, those like moments, they're like spears, they spear into you, where you can see the reality of your situation. Like,
yeah,
up until then, I probably thought I was having a good time. And then it's just like, this is freaking tragic.
yeah, yeah,
This is just tragic,
yeah,
what I'm doing and what I've become. And I had no idea how to get out of it. No idea
yeah.
how not to be the way. It I think what we're saying, that drinking on your own is the biggest indicator that there is a problem and you need to get help. Nobody needs to drink alcohol on their own.
Exactly, and that thing you mentioned just then about having a bottle of wine, a bottle of vodka in your handbag, that's drinking on your own.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
don't bring it out of your handbag in public. You go away somewhere alone to do
Yeah. It
that.
was
You
like nine
find a
o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Yeah.
yeah, you find a sneaky corner, or you go
Yeah.
some, that's drinking alone, and
Yeah.
you're doing that because you're probably, because you can't control yourself and you're ashamed of, but you're not doing it in public. I could go to a party and drink alone because I would go to a party, maybe unlikely for me to have arrived with a bottle of wine, but I would get a bottle of wine and hide it behind the sofa, so that I could occasionally go to that spot, top up my drink secretly, and just sort of keep. That's a little secret bit of behavior I'm doing alone, but I'm
Hmm.
kind of in company. So there's a sort of, I know it's a slightly subtle nuance, but
It-
it's
that's actually, no, that is a good nuance because I've also done that. Is I've
right.
drunk in people's houses and I know they're not going to drink the way that I want to drink.
Yeah,
And I used to do that when I used to visit my mum. I would, she would, I don't even know what kind of, do you remember Cinzano? What is that?
yeah.
I don't even know what that
Oh,
is.
I think it's
Cinzano.
like Campari, both of which my daughter's mother used to drink Campari, and I used to hate it. I mean, it was a disgusting drink, but I know that I don't know what it is.
I
A
don't think
vermouth.
anyone drinks it. I feel like it's something from back in the
It,
day. I don't think anyone drinks it
isn't
anymore.
it a vermouth or something? Don't they call it
Something like
vermouth?
that. Anyway, she, like, my mum would always, like, she has like an occasional sherry or an occasional Cinzano. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
And I remember, like, maybe I had a glass of wine with her, and then I would put the Cinzano and say it was lemonade,
yeah,
and then I'd fill the Cinzano up with water.
yeah, yeah,
But I've done that on more than one occasion, being like, "There's not enough alcohol here for me,"
yeah,
like, and like, just I mean, and that's drinking on your own, like just going in the kitchen, like
yeah.
having an extra glass, but and then like pretending you didn't have that, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah,
all.
I used to go and visit a friend who had those things that you have in bars where you just push up the glass underneath so that you can pour out a measure. I can't remember
Yeah,
what they're
yeah.
called
Oh,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I'd go around to his house and watch television, want a cup of tea. And of course, I'd go and make a cup of tea. But as I'm doing that, I'm knocking three off the thing and knocking it
yeah,
back. That's drinking alone. I was with
yeah.
somebody, But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's sort of alone secretly, but I
Mm,
think to me that is a yeah. Anytime you find anybody who's listening who catches themselves doing that, who has done anything that kind of
mm,
requires a degree of secrecy, that's a really big red flag that there's something
mm.
going on here that
Yeah.
needs addressing. When we started this, it was interesting how it's broadened out because I think it needs to be broadened out. But started off by talking about people living alone drinking, which definitely
Mm,
happens and happens a lot more than it used to. But I think then when you start to add in those extra sort of nuanced activities that are actually drinking alone, out of sight of anybody else, it becomes something that a lot more people do. Because there might be a lot of people here thinking, oh, well, I don't live on my own, I live with somebody else. But then when you add in these other little things like this little nip to the
mm,
kitchen or the little nip to the garage, that's
mm.
drinking alone. You're drinking, yeah, you're protecting your supply. I mean, God, how many couples have I got who've got one of them knows that the person nips out to the garage because they've got a stash out there, or the stash is in the linen cupboard or
Yeah.
wherever it is.
Yeah.
That's drinking alone, and it doesn't have to be that you are, living on your own. But that is a growing phenomena now of people who do live on their own drinking, and you have to ask the question, what is so wrong with your life that
Yeah.
when you get in, you've got to get trolleyed?
You don't even need to leave your house to go and get alcohol. Like I
Yeah.
had to leave, used to, have to go
Oh,
out,
yeah.
right? So now alcohol will be delivered straight to your house. And that
Yes.
that makes drinking alone a lot more it just makes it very, very easy. Like you don't need
Yeah.
to leave your home, your couch, you don't have to dress up, you don't have to do anything. You can be in your pajamas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that makes things a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, and you have to do what I call the supermarket hunt. You have to go to one off license and buy your bottle of wine, and then you
Yes.
can't go back the next day to the same off license because otherwise they'll think you've got a drink
Oh yeah,
problem. So
yeah,
you've got
because
to go
they're
to another one.
because
So
you're
you've got
all
to,
they think about.
yeah, exactly, yeah. They don't think about the profit they're going to make off the alcohol. They think about you and your life and everything else. Yeah, but
Yeah,
then you'll go to so you've got about four different things, places off licenses where you rotate your activities, your purchases, because you don't want to be seen to be. And again, that's all part of the kind of drinking alone shame factor associated with it. But I know loads of people who kind of, and I did it. I would really resist going into the same shop twice
yes,
for fear
yeah.
that they would think I would have.
As if they couldn't spot it at 10 paces.
Yeah, or I mean, God, the bullshit those people must have to put up with, of people going, oh, just
Dinner
stocking up for a
party tonight.
party.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. God,
friends
what
coming over.
yeah, what goes? What do you reckon? Oh my God, they must listen to so much. But yeah, I think all those things are sort of, as I said, nuances of doing something that we know is wrong, that we know we have shame about, that we don't want other people to see, so we keep it hidden. And it comes in many guises. As I said,
Yeah,
it can be as simple as hiding a bottle behind the sofa and
yeah,
taking quiet little nips from it.
yeah.
And but I also wouldn't underestimate the danger factor
Mm,
of falling down, not being able to. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I never suggest anybody detoxes on their own,
100%.
because if they have a seizure and they knock their head on a glass coffee table, I know not everybody has glass coffee tables. I don't have one, but just knock your head on a sharp point. You're on your own. You bleed out. That's a real
Yeah,
danger if you're on your own. And I would never
yeah.
recommend anybody detoxed on their own. But it's a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to end on this. The other thing is about drinking on your own is the guardrails are off, and it is just kind
Yeah,
of glug glug glug, right? It is you cannot you're. I mean, and the amounts that we're drinking that we get used to drinking are actually enormous. So I think our message here is the drinking alone is definitely definitely it's not changed. It's still one of the biggest indicators that your alcohol problem is serious
yeah.
and it's time to get help. And if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, it's time to get help.
And I was just thinking one more thing also is that if we're drinking on our own, I need to go down the supermarket and get something. There's nobody there to say, you can't drive like that. You can't get in the car like that. You're drunk. But no,
Mm.
we think that we're in control, and we've got a deluded idea of what we're in control of.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
red flag without any doubt at all.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Let us know your thoughts and comments when this episode comes out on social media. I'm on Instagram, Veronica J. Valley, or in the Soberful Facebook group. Please like us and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And we will see you next week.